Let's get started. Good evening, and thank you all for joining this session, taking time out from your busy schedule and committing to this learning journey of Tenable Vulnerability Management. I'm your trainer. So this is the TOC that we are going to cover in this training. This half day, I would say the first 4 hours, I always take for setting up the context, setting up the, I would say for the introduction, setting up the context, and starting with the product that we need to focus in the training session. And that's how we are going as per the agenda. So today we will basically be focusing on the first, which is this part, wherein we will be talking about, so we will some though all of you have worked with vulnerability management, you have been into this space. I would still be starting from the scratch, but I will be quite quick. I will make sure that you all are on the same page, and then we will be starting with overview of Tenable Vulnerability Management, the product, its history. It used to be Tenable.io. It used to be something else. It was using some other solution. Today, it is using some other method to discover, identify, and remediate vulnerabilities. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about importance of vulnerability management, why it is important in cybersecurity or in cloud security or in information security, key components of vulnerability management solutions and feature, the cyber exposure lifecycle, attack surface, area and all that, navigating the dashboard of Tenable vulnerability management, and then we will build the lab environment today. So we don't have endpoints or devices which are pre-configured that you will quickly onboard into Tenable vulnerability management and you will start to look for vulnerabilities. No, we don't have that, pre-configured. You will need to build your own lab environment. You will build your own assets, your own subjects based on your choice of operating system. And then I will have you simulate some vulnerabilities. Then I will let you scan from Tenable so that Tenable can find those vulnerabilities. So we will be doing everything, which means in this training will help you to understand the administrative side of Tenable also. Probably in your customer environment, when you're supporting Tenable or any vulnerability management solution for a customer, you don't maintain administrative rights. You don't have access to every minute module of the solution because for that customer has an internal team. You are being given a role, I would say some sort of capability based on RBAC role-based access control, which is needed for you to support or provide scope of support. But in this training, you will have administrative access on the solution. So you will know how to design, implement, and architect the solution for a small, medium, and large corporate when it comes to vulnerability management. How do you onboard this solution for a distributed organization, for a large corporate, which is multi-cloud, which is multi locations, which is in multi-industry verticals. So how do you deal with compliances? How do you deal with cloud as well as non-cloud assets? So non-cloud you've been working with. Cloud you don't know, that is what you're going to learn here. For your understanding, we can also build some assets into Azure, AWS, so that you can onboard them into vulnerability management. So we'll be building the lab environment. We will start with building the lab environment. And if we reach to the end of the session, we'll continue with that activity from Monday onwards when we resume the session. So that's what we're going to do today. Once we are done with building the lab environment, we will start to configure Tenable vulnerability management solution, which starts with sensors, agents. I would say Tenable vulnerability management similar to Qualys scanner appliance, similar to Rapid7, similar to Defender for endpoint. It has multiple methods through which you can discover vulnerabilities in assets like network systems and applications. You can directly deploy a small piece of software on them, which we call agent, and you can instruct that software. You can provide a schedule so that the software or agent discovers vulnerabilities based on the instructions that you will put from the management portal. You can build scanner appliances and you can scan the entire network. It will automatically scan and discover the systems, applications, and you can you can run authenticated scans. That's another option. There is a cloud-based scan also. There are external scanners also. So we look at all the methods which are available when it comes to Tenable vulnerability management. Type of scans, agent scans. Once we look at these options, we will try and configure agent scan, scanner scan, not everything, but I will share documentations with you, and I'll give you liberty to work in your spare time and configure anything that we are not doing in the training. And if you come across any questions, you can discuss it with me. So once we are done with the configuration, we will start to run these scans. We will configure and run scans. We will schedule scans. As part of scan, it will do host discovery. It will discover all the, host and vulnerabilities on it. So we'll look at host discovery. We'll look at other discovery methods. We'll talk about Nessus. Now you worked with Nessus and now you're working with Tenable Nessus. So how Tenable and Nessus are connected with one another, that's what you will understand. These are some configuration options like tagging, asset groups and all that. We will look at. We will look at, Nessus network monitoring installation. We will look at role-based access control, which basically means that if you're deploying Tenable for a customer, who has multiple assets, multiple hosts, and there is a team size of 10, 20 people, would you be granting them all the same level of access? Would you be granting them access based on their roles and responsibilities, which means L1, L2, L3? Uh, is everyone capable of doing all the activities, or they will differ based on who the person is, what level that person works? So we'll look at the administrative part, which is very important, because at the end of this training, you will become somebody who can deploy Tenable from scratch for a customer. If you're part of practice team or center of excellence or COE team are the teams who basically uh, work with clients. They onboard a solution, they do the initial configuration and hand it over to the operations team. The so whether you are part of practice team, whether you are part of operations team, you will know every minute aspect of it. So you will know everything from the practice perspective, which includes design, architecting, and deploying the solution, understanding all the deployment models, comparing and correlating with an industry type, and then you will deploy the solution and work as a consumer and user who will consume the solution. So that's what we are going to do. Once we are done with the configuration, we will move into the assessment part. Then we start to look for vulnerability scans and we will start to configure these scans. We will look for credentials management, vulnerability assessment, compliance assessment. I'm saying depending on the capabilities which are available in the trial, we'll make sure to use all the capabilities which are there. Tenable core analyzing scan results, prioritizing vulnerabilities, vulnerability prioritization, dashboard workbenches and prioritization. That's what we are going to do after configuration. So solution will be configured, then solution capabilities will be executed. Once the capabilities are executed, you will have results, vulnerabilities available. Then you will look into the analysis part, which is you will see how do we look into those vulnerabilities, how do we create dashboards, how do we create reports, how do we do the analysis, how do we prioritize those vulnerabilities, if Tenable has capability to automatically remediate those vulnerabilities or not, are do those vulnerabilities require manual intervention? All that we will look at. Now, there could be n number of vulnerabilities and you may not have expertise or knowledge about each and every vulnerability. So there are times you will have extended teams who you will forward those vulnerabilities and you will continue to collaborate with them, follow up with them, and you will continue to run vulnerability scans to ensure that those vulnerabilities were remediated and appropriate actions were taken so similar vulnerabilities will not reoccur in the system, which is what people at L2 and lead level, as you explained, that you also collaborate with other teams, will be doing. And then in the end, we will look at the remediation scans, that how do we automate the vulnerability remediation up to certain extent, compliance reporting, best practices for ongoing vulnerability management. I can also include one more topic here, which is comparing different vulnerability management solution. So I will also provide you a write-up wherein multiple vulnerability management solutions are compared based on their pros and cons, limitations and capabilities that they bring on the table. In the end, we will have an MCQ based assessment and we will wrap up the session. The training will get over, the relationship will continue for a longer duration. That's about the agenda that we are going to cover in this training. Is everyone with me on this? Do I have any suggestion from any participants on the agenda or any input? Ask questions. Don't just keep it to yourself. Don't just depend on AI or Google to answer your questions. Take advantage. Probably ask. I may have answers to your questions. If I don't have answer, I will get the answer. I will get back to you with the answer. I will keep that into the parking lot and I subsequent day I'll get back to you with the answer. I have good contacts in the industry. with almost all technical solutions, with almost all the companies, I have contacts. I have direct contacts with product managers of most of the solutions that I work with, that I deliver training on. I am a Microsoft certified trainer, which means I have direct access to product management team. I am an AWS authorized instructor champion. Anything you need to know about AWS, be my guest. I'll get that information to you. You want to do some POCs of any solution that has not been available in public domain, let me know. I will get a private preview enabled for you. And I'm also a GCP authorized instructor. That's what I did in the last 6 years, that I did all accreditations and certification with all the public cloud providers. So I get more and more access, which means most of the presentations that I use in my training are official. Most of the labs that I do are official, and anything that you know will have answer for it. So we have direct contact with those teams. We can directly connect with them and get answers. If required, I can bring them all in the training session itself in this meeting and have them answer your questions. So that's all is available. Just let me know whatever you need. So that's about the agenda that we are going to follow in this training. We will build our lab environment in AWS so that by the end of this training, you will learn AWS also. You can go back to business and say that I can also perform vulnerability management for Amazon Web Services or AWS Cloud. I can also do vulnerability management for EC2 instances in Amazon Web Services, VPC networks in Amazon Web Services, and some applications in Amazon. That's what you will go back and tell your business. So it's like you came here to learn vulnerability management through Tenable, and you go back to your management. You go back by learning AWS at the same time. So we are going to build our lab environment in AWS. So that's what we are going to do. So that's about it. Great. Let's start with the vulnerability management, Tenable Vulnerability Management. I will share the portal access with you when the right time comes. Let's first be on the same page. All of us, uh, almost all the participants are working with vulnerability management. So we'll be quick here. We will not spend much time on these slides. But now that I put them together to set up the context, let's talk about it. So vulnerability. I also, since this is an online training, if this would have been a classroom session, I typically use whiteboard. And in online sessions, I use a Word document. I call it session transcript, wherein I make note of pointers that I discuss. Okay. So vulnerability. What, when, how, why, who. We call them WH family. When I was in school, we used to call it WH family. But this WH family is very important in the field of cybersecurity. Why this is important? If you really want to be a good consultant and architect in the long run, you don't want to be working at the same profile that you are currently at. You would want to grow in your career. And the next level is to become a consultant and architect. If you don't move into management, even if you move into management, you will not be a manager, you will be a technical manager. You will be a technical project manager, and then you will continue to work with technology. So technology will not leave you as long as you work in this cybersecurity domain. So this WH family is very important when it comes to cybersecurity. Any terminology, any domain, any keyword, or a technical jargon, let's say, you hear, you must know answers to these questions. What is that technology? In what scenarios or when do we use that technology? How do we use that technology? Why should we use that technology? And who is using that technology as we speak? So that we get some references. If I'm a bank and if there is a new technology that has just been introduced, I would probably not start using it until I find that other banks have started using it. I would be the second person. I would be the third person. I would never be the first person to start to adopt a new technology, because new means challenges, new means risk, new means vulnerabilities, new means issues also, disruption in services. So I've taken the example of banking. Banking or BFSI is one industry vertical that would always be the last vertical to adopt a technology. When the technology remains in existence for 5 to 7 years, that's where you would start to see banking and financial services domain industries or businesses start to do POC and then start to adopt that technology because they deal with finances and they have huge risk, huge impact. They don't want to take chances. And IT would be the first industry vertical that would adopt a technology because IT is all about taking risk. IT is all about innovation. IT is all about remaining up to date. And then anything that is left falls in between. That's what my experience has been while working with banking institutions. Even today, some government banks in India, they are using Windows XP. Windows XP they are using in their embedded systems. They're still using old version of VMware. They're still not using virtualized desktops and applications. They're still using physical servers. And forget about being there in the cloud. They have very little or no presence in cloud at all. While cloud has been there in existence for the last 14, 15 years or 18 years, I'm saying VMware started it, AWS started it back in 2006. We are in 2024, end of 2024. So almost 19 plus years, cloud has been there and they have not started using it. That's how banking and financial industry works. IT was the first industry to adopt it. So the question is, what is vulnerability? Anything that you know that you read, always ask these 5 questions to yourself. If you have answers to these 5 questions, you can communicate well about that technology, and that moment you qualify to become a consultant, or if you have in-depth implementation knowledge of that technology, you become an architect. That's what an architect and consultant are, and that's what you would become in next couple of years, because you will not be working at the same level all the time. Either you will switch from vulnerability management to probably identity and access management, DevSecOps, CASB, any other technology domain, or you would grow within the same technology domain. You will start to deploy, design, and architect these solutions for customers, rather supporting these solutions in operations. That's how the career path for most of the professionals are, or that was my career path. I was part of operations. I was moved into practice team. I became a consultant, became an architect, did a lot of architecture and design, traveled across the world, worked with customers across multiple industry verticals, and then came into the management in the end. And that's where I lost my, interest in full-time employment and I left it because I wanted to remain a technology person. And my organization would not afford me at that package as a technology person. They would say that ROI is not coming. If you continue to handle technology, ROI is not coming, Raghu. So you need to handle clients. You need to do hunting and farming. And that's something that I was opposed to doing it. Okay. So what is vulnerability? That's the question. So we have terminologies like IOA, IOC, IOM. Any participant who can explain what these terminologies are? Anyone who knows about it, who have heard these terminologies? Okay. So IO stands for indicators of attack. Compromise. IOC stands for indicators of compromise, and IOM stands for indicators of misconfiguration. These are the terminologies: IOA, IOC, IOM. We use these terminologies a lot in cybersecurity, especially when we talk about solutions like endpoint detection and response, CASB solutions, SIEM and SOAR solutions, vulnerability management solutions. We make use of these terminologies. So what is a vulnerability? If I want to explain vulnerability to a layman, somebody who is non-technical, somebody who has just completed MBA in finance, how would you explain vulnerability to that person? Any of the participant?
So vulnerability is like means a flaw or weakness in any system.
Okay, so you're saying what? Flaw?
Weaknesses,
Weakness
yeah, in any system.
of any system. All right. But the person is, MBA in finance. So the next question is, what is weakness? I'm saying my laptop is smaller in weight. It is made of plastic, while somebody else's laptop is made up of steel, and it weighs 4 kg. So which means my laptop has vulnerability because it looks weak to me. What is weakness
No.
here?
Weakness here, we can say that that configuration is not set up properly, or we can say the version which we are using for a software or any other applications, that version is not updated here.
Maybe Raghu, we can say that something which is not correct or right as it should be, maybe in layman terms.
Broken window, broken lock,
Broken lock. Is that a
broken
vulnerability?
window. Broken window, broken lock is a vulnerability for thieves. They can easily, for
Yeah.
laymen, this
We can say
example.
means
But that
which
person
is
has done
not
MBA in
secure.
finance. I'm sure that person must have a laptop, right? These days, you can't do MBA without a laptop.
Correct.
These days, kids have laptops. Okay.
Their laptop
Yeah.
without
So you
password.
all are right. It's a
One
flaw.
yeah,
It's a
one,
weakness. Configuration is not set up properly. If I want to color code this is how I will color code. Indicator of misconfiguration. Anything that is not configured, partially configured, or misconfigured. It's one and the same thing. It's a vulnerability. So for example, you have a server that is acting as a database. That server needs to accept traffic from application so that application can read from the database, write to the database. For that, that server will have certain ports open. If it's a SQL database, the port is 1433, 1433 and 1434. So it needs port 1433 and 1434 open. But other than 1433 and 1434, there are other ports open. 22, 5723, 25. Some other ports are also open. It's a misconfiguration. Why do you have port 22 open on a database server which is running with Windows operating system? 22 is secure FTP port. It is a SSH port. So it's a vulnerability. It's a misconfiguration. I don't have a reason to have that port on my database server unless I have that server built on a Linux operating system, or I'm using some sort of application. I'm installing some application there which requires an SFTP connectivity. So anything which is anything where, so when it says configuration is not set up properly, not available, not present, or partially present. That's what a vulnerability is. So I've just given you one example of vulnerability. The other example could be an application configuration. An application that I need to configure, let's say Google Chrome. It is one of the most popular web browser that we use today. Most of the organizations use Google Chrome, but Google Chrome has a lot of vulnerabilities. A lot of extensions get deployed in Google Chrome. Hackers can deploy payload in the form of session cookies and can exploit the system. So it's an example of application vulnerability. And that is why most of the organizations do not allow usage of non-Microsoft browsers. They only allow Microsoft Edge, for web browsing on their endpoints and servers. And they control the behavior through EDR solutions like Defender for Endpoint, CrowdStrike, Sentinel-1, which would not allow users to use non-Microsoft browsers on their systems. So when you are in vulnerability management, remember one thing, you are also dealing with other cybersecurity domains and you actively contribute and participate. Probably you don't realize it, but you're working with other domains at the same time. Or if required, you to explore other domains, you would not need to start from scratch. You would have that base already built while working with vulnerability management, because vulnerability management is one domain that overlaps with multiple cybersecurity domains. Okay, so that's what vulnerability is, which is it's a flaw, it's a weakness in the system. Some configurations are not properly done. Some configurations are completely, not available or invisible, or some are partially configured. Outdated systems, any legacy OS application or legacy tool or solution. It could be network solution, it could be database solution, it could be anything. Anything which is legacy, which has not been updated for a long time, outdated system. That's a vulnerability. Or I would say missing or absence of security patches. Security patches, security updates. Every solution from its OEM vendor receives certain upgrades. We call them patches, security patches. It must have those patches deployed. The patches must be up to date. Incorrect configuration. As I gave you the example of network, network is incorrectly configured. Networking devices like firewall, switches, VPN, WAF, other devices, they like DLP devices, network DLP devices, IDS, IPS, etc. They are misconfigured. They are not properly configured. You have done some misconfigurations there. So the perfect example of this, let's say you want to block personal email domains in your company and you want to block Gmail. So you've configured in the proxy, you have blocked gmail.com. But is that the only way somebody can access Gmail? No, there are other ways also. Googlemail.com, mail.google.com. There are many. You've just configured Gmail. It's a partial configuration, incorrect configuration. This will lead to a vulnerability. A vulnerability is also an exception in the security policy, in the security configuration, a leakage in the security policy, something that is not allowed, but users are able to do it. It is also a vulnerability. Vulnerability is not what Tenable will identify or what Qualys Rapid7 and Nessus has been identifying for you so far. Vulnerability is also outside of those solutions. That's what you need to understand, because vulnerability is a common cybersecurity terminology, not in the context of vulnerability management. We call it VAPT, Vulnerability Assessment and Penetration Testing. This used to be the terminology. Then VAPT got converted into red teaming, blue teaming, green teaming, white teaming, whatever you call it. And then vulnerability assessment became vulnerability management. They broke it down into two pieces and two separate teams were formed. So that's what vulnerability is. Broken log, broken window. That's a great example for a non-technical person. It's a vulnerability, obviously, because this will allow thieves, intruders to barge in, to get into your home, to get into your system, to get into your network, because it has a broken log, it has a broken window. So that's example of vulnerability. So these are the examples of vulnerabilities. Indicators of misconfigurations are examples of vulnerabilities. Indicators of compromise. Now, when there is a vulnerability in the system, what is the impact of vulnerability? So I have a broken window. I have a broken lock, or my home main entrance is open. What is the impact of it? The impact is that exploit. That's the impact. Vulnerabilities will get exploited. And if they get exploited, then there could be a breach. There could be a security incident. There could be an attack that may happen, right? So impact is exploit. That there will be an exploit. There will be an exploit that will be done. There could be threat actors, vectors. Actors basically means hackers. You have different types of hackers, red hacker, black hacker, white hacker. So threat actors will be there, and threat vectors are the methods. They will get activated. So that will get exploited if you do not handle that situation, if you do not fix that vulnerability. So if I want to define vulnerability, that's what I've defined in the presentation here. So it says a vulnerability refers to a flaw or weakness in a system, application, or network that could be exploited by a threat actor, like a hacker, to gain unauthorized access, cause disruptions, or steal data. Vulnerability can stem from software bugs, outdated patches, misconfigurations, or even weak user credentials. Let's take an example here. Let's take a real-time example here. So I have Sachin. Sachin is a lead. And then let's say I have Dikshita. Dikshita is an analyst. So we have Dikshita. Forgive me for incorrectly typing your name, Dikshita. Shitha. Shitha. So we have Dikshita, who is an analyst, and Sachin, who is a lead. Now both Dikshita and Sachin has admin access to a system. Admin access to an application. Both have admin access to an application. Dikshita is more ground on feet. She's working with vulnerability management, and she is addressing vulnerabilities. She's also configuring the solution. So she maintains admin access to the application. Sachin is more into people management, people and client management. People and customer management. And he does not actively participate into day-to-day operational activities, but he also maintains admin access to an application. Do you see a vulnerability in this situation, in this example?
We have to check the role-based access control. Yeah.
There is a vulnerability in this example. The vulnerability is around identity and access management. So we have identity and access management. I say what you need to understand, guys, from today onwards, because that's what something new for you. That's what something that you probably were not focusing on. So vulnerability is not always about network, operating system, and application. This is what people think that vulnerability is about. There is a misconfiguration in network. The operating system is not patched properly. There are some applications into the machine which are outdated, which do not have up-to-date patches. They just consider that it is vulnerability. Every day they run a scan, this information comes, they dump it into a report, send it to the appropriate team and say, please fix these vulnerabilities. That is not vulnerability. We are in 2024 now, which means everything has evolved over a period of time. So the same thing, networks, operating system, and application we were doing in 2016. I still remember working with Qualys in 2010 for the first time. At that point in time, also I was dealing with these three topics: network, operating system, and application. But that is not vulnerability anymore. Other cybersecurity domains also has vulnerability. That's the reason I said indicators of attack, indicators of compromise. In this example, what is happening? There is a vulnerability. The vulnerability is IAM misconfiguration. It's misconfiguration of IAM. When Sachin is not participating into day-to-day operational activities, why is he being granted admin access to the application? He probably doesn't need it. He's not participating into day-to-day operational activities. But because he has admin access to the application, what will happen? If Sachin's ID is compromised, if there is a brute force attack, credential hijacking that happens to Sachin's ID, the damage will be maximum. Because with admin access, a hacker can reconfigure the entire application, change his can delete all the security configuration, can delete all the modules, or configure the application based on their requirement. So this is an IAM misconfiguration, and the misconfiguration is basically violating the least privilege principle. Least privilege principle says that identity should be granted least privilege and separation of duty. Based on their role and duty, they should be granted least access. So since Sachin is not dealing with day-to-day operational activities, probably we can grant him read-only access to the application. Read-only access so that he will still maintain access to the application, but in read-only mode. And whenever he needs to perform any administrative activity, we can follow the principle of just-in-time access or privileged identity management. With that, we can grant Sachin just-in-time access to administrative capability for a limited time, which is time-bound access, time-bound administrative access, so that he can perform that work. And as soon as he is done, the access will be revoked and he will become a normal user once again with read-only access that he will maintain all the time. So read-only access he maintains all the time, administrative access, whenever he needs, he is given just-in-time access. So this is a vulnerability. IAM misconfiguration is a vulnerability. This is also one example of vulnerability. There are multiple examples of vulnerability. So from this moment onward, please remember that this is not only the vulnerability that we deal with. There are multiple vulnerabilities. There are vulnerabilities in application. There are vulnerabilities in network also, which vulnerability management systems can't identify. So anything which is misconfigured, anything which is not configured, anything which is partially configured, any security control or configuration is also an example of vulnerabilities. So these are my examples of vulnerabilities. Now, what is this indicator of attack? This indicator of attack is any vulnerability or misconfiguration in the system that can be compromised, that can lead to a security incident. That's indicator of attack. Indicator of compromise is something that is already compromised. Probably there was a vulnerability. You were using .NET Framework 3.5. You were using TLS 1.0. These are the authentication protocols. TLS 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. 1.3 is the latest, but you were using a legacy authentication protocol in your application that got compromised. So that's our indicators of compromise. So remember these three terminologies, we use them a lot in cybersecurity. And when it comes to vulnerability management, IOM is the terminology that relates to vulnerability management. Is everyone with me on this? Okay, so we'll move on. So that's vulnerability. Now in the cloud context, why are we saying in the cloud context? Because at the end of the day, probably in next 5 years, you would hardly have systems running on premises. They will either be in private cloud or they will be in public cloud, but you will not have on-premises data centers. It doesn't mean that on-premises data centers will disappear. No, cloud is also an on-premises data center, but then it belongs to somebody else who maintains, manages, and takes care of it. So on-premises data centers would exist, but businesses would stop maintaining their own on-premises data centers. They would move everything into the cloud. And whatever is left, that would be running into the private cloud. So in the cloud context, vulnerability is misconfigured security settings. Any misconfiguration that you have done in the security settings. For example, in the application code, you have embedded the credentials. So that's misconfiguration in the security. See, every application needs authentication. Authentication is the core requirement. Authentication and authorization, they are the core principles of IAM, or they are the core requirements for any application today. Even our mobile phones, they have authentication. Laptops has authentication. Our home has authentication. Everywhere you see authentication. Without knowing who you are, you will not be allowed to enter. So authentication and authorization is everywhere. Now, this may also lead to vulnerabilities. So for example, that you have an application and the application code has credentials embedded into it. That's a vulnerability. Embedding credentials into the application code is a vulnerability. So when that application needs to authenticate to a database, because a database would not allow access to an application without authentication. So application approaches database and say, I need to read some data. Database says, please give me authentication. Please provide your login credentials. An application shares the login credential. That's a vulnerability. And these vulnerabilities are very common and they get exploited. So what you should be doing to solve this, you should be using Vault, credential Vault. Instead of embedding code into the application, credentials into the application code, you should be using a reference to a Vault solution that application will use to supply credential for authentication to the database. So application code will not have the credentials. It will just have a URL, a reference to a Vault. It could be a Key Vault in Azure. It could be a KMS, the credential certificate manager, or a KMS service in AWS. Or it could be HashiCorp Vault. It could be any other Vault solution that has the capability to store passwords, credentials, license keys, encryption keys, or any other API keys which are required for authentication. So this is a vulnerability, an application that has credentials embedded into it. Now the question is, can Tenable find it? Can Qualys find it? Can Rapid7 find it? No. These solutions are not developed to find vulnerability at the code level. But this is an example of vulnerability. For that, you have solutions which are part of SEST, DEST, and IST, which is part of DevSecOps, wherein you have solutions like Acunetics, you have solutions like Veracode. They are quick to identify, they are quick to scan the code of an application and identify presence of any open source library, any credentials into the application code. But that is also an example of vulnerability. So that's what vulnerabilities are. It is not limited to what you have been doing so far. Probably you are quite okay in your current business unit, in your current project with your current knowledge, but that is not sufficient when you go out in the market. When you speak to experts, they would expect you to know more about vulnerabilities when you claim to have a quality number of years of experience in this domain. Okay. So misconfigured security settings. Default configurations in cloud resources can leave data exposed. For example, a cloud storage bucket might be unintentionally left open to the public. Now, probably in your scope of support, you're only managing vulnerabilities in virtual machines or up to certain extent applications or in the network. But when it comes to the advanced platforms like cloud, you have other applications which may have vulnerabilities present into it. And these solutions are now advanced enough to find vulnerabilities into the cloud services also. So Qualys has this capability. Rapid7 has the capability. They have connectors available for leading public cloud service providers, wherein they can quickly scan the cloud service configuration and tell you where exactly the vulnerabilities lies. This example, cloud storage bucket might be unintentionally left open to public. So you create a bucket and you make it public. Uh, it is like creating a folder in Google Drive and giving it public access to everyone. So whosoever has URL can access that folder without any authentication. That's the example of it, because most of you use Google Drive or OneDrive. Shared responsibility model gaps. Now, when it comes to vulnerabilities, you have shared responsibility model in the cloud as well as with other teams also. So that gap, if that gap is there, then there could be vulnerabilities. API and web interfaces that also have vulnerabilities. Outdated and unpatched software, something that you've been dealing for a long time. Outdated or unpatched software. So when you run a vulnerability scan, the vulnerability management software will quickly scan the registry of an operating system. It will identify when was the last time it was patched. It will also have a vulnerability management database that has information for known vulnerabilities of all the operating systems that exist, along with the versions and release of it, it will quickly map. It will see, okay, this specific patch is not present. It will show that as a vulnerability. In the report, it will say that this patch is missing, or this log4j vulnerability is there, this specific vulnerability is there because it has not been addressed into it. So that's what vulnerability is. Now, these are different types of vulnerabilities. So as I said, vulnerability is not only limited to first three that you have been dealing with, which is network vulnerabilities, operating system vulnerabilities, and application vulnerabilities. It has more to it. Let's first look at network vulnerabilities. Open port is one type of network vulnerability that can allow unauthorized access if they aren't secured. So we have 65,535 ports on which a system accepts communication incoming and outgoing both. We must ensure that only required ports are open and rest of them are closed. We have solutions like Nmap. We have solutions like Wireshark that we can use. Burp Suite is also there. Using those solutions, I can quickly identify open network ports on a system. If I am a hacker, I will make use of those ports to enter into the system. Or if I am a security professional or an ethical hacker, a white hat hacker, then I would basically report it to the appropriate team and I would have them closed on priority. Man in the middle attack, weak encryption or insecure protocols enable attackers to intercept data. So if you have weak encryption in your application, I will say you're using TLS 1.0 and your application is HTTPS, but it uses TLS 1.0 when users are dumping data into the application, reading data from the application, or writing data to the application. Man in the middle attack can happen. Somebody can intercept that communication, change the message so that the server will provide what hacker needs, not what end user is asking for. Denial of service attack. This is another type of vulnerability. I'm saying this is a type of attack, cybersecurity attack or common attacks, but they are result of vulnerabilities. So network weaknesses can be exploited to overwhelm system, making them unavailable to legitimate users. So that's a vulnerability if there's a weakness in the system. For example, if your application doesn't verify the input, if it doesn't verify the information, then there could be a vulnerability. Maybe your application requests information from end user, but when application is asking for a phone number, end user is typing a letter. When application is asking for a name, end user is typing 123. How come you have 123 in the name? How come you have a letter in the phone number? So validation is not there. So in the absence of validation, there could be a denial of service attack. A hacker can send multiple spurious requests in the form of unvalidated credentials. Application will be busy serving it and legitimate users will not be able to access the application. So that's a vulnerability. Operating system vulnerabilities, unpatched softwares, privilege escalations, weak user authentications. You've been dealing with them for a long time, so I will not spend time there. Application vulnerabilities. We have top 10 application security vulnerabilities from OWASP, top 20 application security vulnerabilities from Sense, and then there are another top 25 application security vulnerabilities. It's an open source project. If you've not heard about it, in fact, all vulnerability management solutions, they basically show vulnerabilities based on OWASP and Sense top 25. These are top 10 web application security risk or vulnerabilities which are present in web applications. Now, if you notice, this list was revised in 2021 and they have put broken access control on the top. It used to be at 5th position, then it was moved on to the top, which basically means that by this time, identity related attacks were quite common. They were most prominent. Network related attacks were not there, which basically means identity is the new parameter today. If I need to hack into a network or a system, I would not waste time in hacking into the network because today next generation firewalls are so strong that it is really not possible to hack into a network easily. It would take a lot of time, efforts, and probably it is not viable. The ROI will not be there. I will not get returns on my investments if I try to hack into a network. I would rather hack into an identity. It is very easy to hack into Sachin's identity. Most of the employees, through social engineering, I can easily find out who Sachin is. I can see on his LinkedIn profile that he is a lead in vulnerability management in cybersecurity team. Most of the employees have their login credentials and email address same in these days. So which means Sachin, first name dot last name at dxe.com is the login credential. All I'm left with is password. I can use password cracking or credential hijacking solutions, and they can help me to crack into Sachin's password. Done. I have username and password, and Sachin is a legitimate user of DXE. So Sachin can log into any application of DXE from anywhere. If CASB solution is not there, which restrict access to applications from authenticated devices only. If MFA is not configured, which would require additional challenge for the hacker to gain access to. So I'm just giving you example that how can these vulnerabilities be exploited. So identity is the new parameter. If I need to hack into somebody's network, somebody's system, I would not waste my time. I would rather target a user who has high privileges, and I would spend time in getting access to that user account. And any firewall, any system would not stop me because that is a legitimate user in the system. Nobody would stop that user. If I try to come via network, it may not be possible sometimes because nowadays, organizations are using next generation firewalls. They are quite proficient, and the time to hack into or to bypass those firewalls policies and then the cost that it involves sometimes is not feasible. So broken access control, that's the first vulnerability in any application. And I gave you the example, which is embedding credentials into the application, having applications with weak authentication protocols, or configuring applications with weak passwords, not using strong password policy. Can somebody give me an example of a strong password policy? Give me an example of a strong password policy.
Password length,
Password length, how
alphanumeric.
much?
Minimum
How
is
many?
minimum 8 we consider.
Okay.
No
8.
common words.
And then you said 8 characters I need.
Yes, alphanumeric.
One numeric. Okay.
One special character
Okay.
and repetitive words or number
Should be there or should not be there?
should not be there.
Okay.
Past passwords not be same.
Okay. John at 2024. This aligns with your password policy. There is no repetitive number. It has a special character. It has a numeral. It has uppercase and lowercase, and it
But
has 9 characters.
yeah,
Should
repetitive number is there 202
should
two
not
times.
be matched with a username also.
Yeah,
No,
actually.
2024 is not the repeated number.
Okay.
Okay. So what point I'm trying to make here is that you must have a strong password policy. This is not a strong password policy that you just gave me an example. Even if you say username should not be there, probably John is not the username. It's a common name, right? So the password policy should discourage usage of common names, common places. That's what the strong password policy is. But you don't have that password policy. Most of the password, why is it possible for somebody to crack into the password? Why? Because people are creating passwords which basically relates to their life, their actions, their taste and preferences, their career, their domain, their interest. And it is easily to find out about a person. You tell me a person's name, I would hardly take 7 days and I can get you all amount of data, all amount of information about that person. It is just take 7 days.
It's
Because
a social engineering.
social engineering is there are multiple ways. I'm saying there is a lot. uh, When you do courses like, Security Plus, CompTIA Security Plus, or Certified Ethical Hacking, or there are some more courses. When you do those courses, you will realize that it has become so easy in today's world to find information about somebody. It is so easy. Even the name is sufficient to find that information. You just need one piece of information. Through social engineering, I can get any amount of information. See, most of the people have LinkedIn profile. On your profile, I see your name. You probably have left your contact information. You're not using 10 mobile numbers. You're using one or two, right? Which means that number is also available. That number is, that number is attached with your PAN card, with your bank number, with your Aadhaar card number. So with your mobile number, I get to know your PAN card. With your PAN card, I get to know all the bank accounts that you maintain. Or probably with your mobile, I can get to know your Aadhaar card. From there, I can get your mobile information. I can get into your CIBIL score. Your CIBIL score will tell me everything. And in order to get the CIBIL score, all I need is the mobile phone number of a person. That's it. Or the PAN card number. Is it that difficult to find out? I can easily find out. Go back and check your Facebook. If you are a social person, check your Facebook. You probably have shared all of that information knowingly or unknowingly in the past. And it is not easy to get into Facebook of a person. It's very easy. So don't just be serious when WhatsApp says that we use end-to-end encryption while you are talking to somebody, while you're making a video call, or while you're chatting with somebody. That is just to relax you, to mm, uh, to make you use those services. That encryption is the weakest encryption that they use. Why? Because it's a free service. Why would somebody spend money on a product which is not giving any return? Our WhatsApp that we use today. So if you're doing personal chats with people over WhatsApp, I'm telling you right away, though it says it is end-to-end encrypted, but it is easy, very easy for somebody to get access to that chat, intercept that chat, because you're not paying to WhatsApp. However, if you're using a business account, then the level of security is different. Same is the case with Facebook. You don't pay, then you become a product for them. So there is no security. The point that I'm trying to make here is that in today's world, it is very easy to compromise a system, compromise an identity, compromise an application, compromise a network. The only thing that can protect you is awareness, knowledge of the tools and solutions, awareness about the best practices, awareness about the controls. And who is expected to have that knowledge? None other than yourself, because you are in cybersecurity. You're part of this domain. You can't spare yourself stating that I am more into vulnerability management. So if I don't know, I'm okay. No. When you are into cybersecurity, you are expected to know all of it, probably as a secondary knowledge that you must have. So in today's world, it is not I'm saying it is not difficult. That's what I cover in my ethical hacking courses. In my course on day one, I ask one participant to volunteer. I seek name of that person. By the end that course is over, on the last day of the training, I share all the information about that person. And they all get surprised that how come I have all of that information. It's very easy. There is no rocket science here. I did not search for anything. They have actually provided all the information. Name is more than sufficient sometimes if it is unique. Otherwise, you will have some other parameters to get the information. So same is the case with business. In today's age, it is very easy to hack into a network, to an application, to a system, or to an identity. It all starts with identity. It all starts with credential hijacking, password cracking, brute force attack, or SQL injection attack. With a small SQL injection attack, I can get the entire database of the company dumped within a couple of minutes on my system. Forget about name and email address. I can even get their pay scale and everything, because all the companies are using database at the end of the day to store information. And they probably have not configured it in the right manner. And that's what you need to identify as a vulnerability management professional. you should know what are the best practices to secure a database. Database is one of the application, and you should not 100% be depending on Tenable, Qualys, Rapid7 to find that information. Probably tool may not have that capability, and you just can't say the tool doesn't know, so I'm okay with it. So there are ways. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that what you have known so far, the first three options, they are not the only examples or types of vulnerability. There are more, and these are the vulnerabilities. Cloud specific vulnerabilities, which is misconfigured cloud services, storage buckets, access policies, insecure APIs. This is a perfect example of vulnerabilities today. Now we have connected systems all over world. One thing is connected to another. Just like on a network, every devices can communicate and collaborate. Nowadays, we are living into a connected system, which basically means with one debit card, I can walk up to any ATM, I can withdraw money. My debit card is from SBI. I can walk up to HDFC Bank and withdraw money. How? The backend systems are connected. Databases are connected. They are using APIs. I can, I'm saying if I need to log into an application, I don't need to create credentials for that application. I can use federated identities. A perfect example of it I'll show you right now. Okay. So the perfect example of LinkedIn I'll show you. I need to log into LinkedIn, which means I need to create user ID and password for LinkedIn. No need. I can use my Gmail account to log into LinkedIn. I don't even need to provide a single piece of information to LinkedIn. I can federate LinkedIn with my Gmail account, and Google and LinkedIn, they have federation. They use OpenID Connect protocol through which they are federated. So with just my Gmail ID, I'm able to log into LinkedIn. Now, this is a benefit that I see as a user because this will help me to have less number of credentials. I don't need to remember multiple login credentials for multiple web portals that I use, like email portals, Yahoo, Microsoft Hotmail, Livemail, Gmail, social networking websites, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, job portals, Naukri, Indeed.com, a professional networking like LinkedIn or any other applications, gaming applications everywhere. What I can do, I can use Gmail credentials everywhere if they support federation. What is the flip side of it? The flip side is the challenge. What if my Gmail is compromised? Everything will get compromised. If somebody has access to my Gmail account, that person can get access to any service that I use because I have everything federated with Gmail. However, I have made my Gmail so much secure to the best of my knowledge and experience that it would be very difficult to hack into my Gmail account. Now, not everyone would have this level of capability. People use technology to simplify life. They don't understand the flaw of that technology. So we all use iPhones. We take it as a matter of prestige and we use iPhones. There is a lot of vulnerabilities in iPhone. Why? Because we don't use it to its fullest capability. And that's where the vulnerabilities are. You have less vulnerabilities in Android, more vulnerabilities in iOS. Probably you would have, so far you were thinking that iPhone is more secure than Android. It's opposite. It's vice versa. I have done that in a number of trainings, live demonstration, wherein it is easier to hack into an iOS than to an Android phone. Why? Because we are not using it to its fullest capability. We only use 10% of the capability, and that's where, or we don't understand how technology works. That's the perfect example of insecure APIs. So hybrid connectivity, federation, these are all vulnerabilities, or they are vulnerabilities which can be exploited by professionals. And if they are exploited, it would be easy for somebody to work or an application. So insecure APIs, right now everything is connected and that connection is also a risk. Earlier, we used to live in isolation. That isolation also had a risk, but now we are living in more riskier domain, wherein everything is connected. We are using UPI, we are using wallets, we are using multiple methods of payment, and we don't realize every time you make a payment online, the payment processor is storing your information. They are tokenizing it as per RBI guideline, but they're also storing it, which means you have your personal details stored on multiple on multiple solutions that you are not even aware of because you don't bother about it. So sometimes not knowing everything is a bliss, is like a blessing in disguise. And sometimes knowing everything is a pain. So I'm more concerned about security because I'm working in this domain. And if a cybersecurity attack happens on me, then it's a shame. But if somebody, for my wife, who is a non-technical person, who is into judiciary, all she knows is IPC and BPC and whatnot, she won't bother about it. I'm saying you must be, you must be noticing a digital arrest, attack is happening more and more on educated people, like ex-army officers, eminent lawyers, doctors. They are becoming victim of digital arrest. They are being looted by people who are typically non-technical or who have just done some courses and they are they are getting looted of their hard-earned money or their corruption money, whatever you call it. And that amount is in lakhs, crores. And say this has become so obvious that the Honorable Prime Minister of India had to speak about this incident for 15 minutes. Imagine, Prime Minister of a country is talking about a cyber attack and encouraging and guiding people to not fall victim of it. Report it to the agencies, the enforcement agencies or cybercrime.org or other agencies. So that's the level of that's the world that we live in. However, we are more focused about our projects and we don't bother about what's happening all around us. But this is also an example of vulnerabilities. These are vulnerabilities. So this is a human vulnerability of lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge is a vulnerability that will get exploited and you will fall victim of those security incidents or attack. Hardware and IoT vulnerabilities. This is happening a lot. You must have seen that in Bond movies or probably in sci-fi, science fiction movies, wherein somebody is able to control your device. You're driving a car. Now car is getting driven automatically. You are applying brakes. Brakes are not getting applied. You try to accelerate, it's not getting accelerated. You try to take left and right turn, steering is not responding, as if somebody is controlling the car, which is IoT and OT vulnerability. This is very much possible. These days you have, I'm saying this all started back in 2016. I was in, Detroit, which is known as automobile capital of North America, wherein most of the companies like Ford have their manufacturing units. So I was in Detroit at Ford. I was working with Microsoft. They were working on connected car technology, wherein they were trying to control the car using a remote control or using IoT. They had constructive, constructive objectives in mind. In 2016, we are in 2024, wherein hackers can hack into our car, our monitoring system, and they can probably control the car. Most recently, there was an incident that happened with Tesla also. People consider Tesla as the safest autonomous car. It happened with Tesla that all of a sudden the car, security control was hijacked, and the car actually, you know, uh, jumped off the flyover. However, the car was so secure that the driver did not get any, serious damage. But when they actually did forensic, since it was an autonomous car, the drivers was sleeping after giving instruction to the car that take me to that place. He was sleeping, and then when he woke up, he was in the hospital. So when it was investigated by Tesla, it was confirmed that the security system was hijacked into. Somebody got access to the system and actually triggered it. So that's IoT vulnerabilities. This happens a lot. Probably you don't deal with those. That is not in your scope of support as we speak with your current customers, but this is also an example of vulnerabilities. There are solutions which can identify vulnerabilities on IoT and OT devices also. Configuration vulnerabilities. default configurations. For example, I'm using a system with default configuration, admin, username and password, default passwords, default credentials. That's default configuration vulnerabilities. This happened with most recently this happened. I just don't remember with whom. They have a legacy application which was using default credentials, and because of which hackers were able to exploit. They were able to discover that vulnerability. They exploited it, and they were able to steal data from the company. I just don't remember. It was a large corporate, probably Google or Amazon. I'll probably in the next session I'll tell you the right name, and I'll share that article as well. That's an authentic article that came from Gartner. Anything that comes from Gartner, you can trust it blindly. Thousands for Forrester, these are analyst firm in the world. It is not possible to influence them. Why would they write against Google? So it happened. A default configuration vulnerability was discovered and exploited by hackers. Human-related vulnerabilities, social engineering. Humans don't have technical knowledge, so attackers trick employees into revealing confidential information or bypass security controls. Phishing attacks. This afternoon, I was doing the same exercise with my participants, wherein I gave them a task and I said, if you were a hacker for a day and all your crimes are forbidden, what kind of security attack would you choose and why? And most of the participants, they chose social engineering. They chose phishing attack. They says it is easy to trigger. The ROI is good. You get more information with less efforts, and you can trick people who are non-technical. Rather trying to hack into a network or an application which is more technical. A human can easily be tricked into clicking on a link or providing credentials. It's very easy. So social engineering, insufficient training. Employees who are unaware of security practices may inadvertently create vulnerabilities. Weak password practices. I just gave you an example. You may have a strong password policy, but there are weaknesses into that policy. So you may want to create a policy, or probably the policy is not sufficient. You will need to monitor the usage of that policy also, right? So these are the vulnerabilities which can get exploited.